Are Bayern Munich's bosses unable to see Thomas Tuchel is seeking to get rid of all the team's leaders? Bavarian football works. In what has been speculated for a while, but ultimately confirmed with a report from Bild journalists Christian Falk and Toby Altschaffel on Tuesday, Bayern Munich could be headed for a massive overhaul next summer, and a surprise, most of the team's leaders or biggest personalities are included in the alleged purge. Fans can take that news as speculation by Bild and Sport 1. Funny how their stories dropped within minutes of each other, isn't it? Or they can scoff at the notion that a coach, who has barely won a thing, would be able to wield so much power. But this looks to be a long-term campaign that Thomas Tuchel started to implement at the end of last season. The timing was both coordinated and ominous, given that the players were out of the country and that the stories dropped just hours before the team was set to face Manchester United in the Champions League. It might be a tinfoil hat theory in the eyes of some, we sometimes specialize in those, but in order to build the team in his own vision, it appears that Tuchel has mounted an effort to get rid of the squad's leaders, who perhaps could be considered threats to his own job security, or at least be hindrances in achieving whatever vision he has for the roster. Far-fetched? Maybe, but Tuchel might have systematically started this process through his use of the media and his lineup selections. It does not take a forensic investigator to see that the players who have become Tuchel's targets are those who are considered to have the biggest personalities or who are the squad's known leaders. Manuel Neuer. A goalkeeper inching his way toward retirement, Neuer's power within the locker room walls lessens with the exit of any long-term veteran of the club. The more turnover that occurs, the less meaning his voice has. Thomas Müller. Relegated to being a deep reserve, despite having qualities that could yield success on this team, Müller is an afterthought and is more valuable as a team spokesman than a player to Tuchel at this point. Joshua Kimmich. Once considered untouchable, Tuchel has launched an open campaign to replace the squad's number 6. Leon Goretzka. Tuchel not only criticized Goretzka publicly, he benched the midfielder and placed him behind Konrad Laimer on the team's depth chart to start this season. Despite all of that, Goretzka has persevered. Matthijs de Ligt. Despite being Bayern Munich's best defender by a large margin last season, the Dutchman has also come under fire from Tuchel, while his more error-prone teammates, Dayot Upamecano, Kim Min-jae, are allowed to push forward without a public shaming. Serge Gnabry. A close confidant of Kimmich, Gnabry's performances are more volatile than the others listed above, but his recent inclusion on the list of the club's problem children was a little shocking and could show how deep this attempt to reboot the teams does. Alphonso Davies. While listed in Bild's report, Davies' issues likely comes down to lack of development, combined with a touch of immaturity. In hopes of getting more money, the team wants to see better performances from the Canadian. A big personality with a growing presence globally, Davies could also be considered a threat to anyone insecure about power. One thing to consider is how the players, beside of Müller, left Tuchel dangling in the wind to make excuses for their absences after the weekend's 5-1 drubbing at the hands of Eintracht Frankfurt. The move could have meant a few things. Frustration, exasperation, surprise, or maybe the players did not want to have to be in a position to back the coach's strategies or tactics in a game where the entire unit, including Tuchel's chosen few, Harry Kane and Leroy Sané, came out flat. Maybe the message the team was sending was that they were embarrassed, or maybe they were just making a collective point about where the locker room is at the moment. Someone thin-skinned could take offense to be left alone to account for a loss, just saying. Regardless of how you might feel about those players, the precedent will be set for Tuchel to change the roster on a whim, thereby absolving himself of blame for all poor performances and diverting the attention to his players. On great team, coaches don't lead the unit, players do. Tuchel appears to be ready to try and buck that trend by bringing in players who will be under his wing and control. That seems dangerous. In the end, a fire sale on these players might or might not happen, but Bayern Munich is towing a fine line if it is putting all of its eggs into Tuchel's basket. While reputedly a great tactician, you could argue that Bayern Munich fans have not exactly seen that as of yet. Tuchel has had a propensity in his career to alienate players, break relationships, and create barriers within locker rooms, as he seemed to be attempting with his preferential treatment of Harry Kane and Leroy Sané. The Bavarians could be playing with fire and empowering a coach to fully strip the Mia San Mia mentality from the core of its squad rather than actually implement it. Instead of the power to lead going to the players, Tuchel will look be the beacon, a position that might be hard to imagine given his gruff personality. This is a risk and like an unnecessary one, but Bayern Munich could be headed down this road without looking back. Hopefully, the club's bosses ask the question, what if he's wrong, before splintering a talented and winning roster. If Tuchel is not correct, he likely will not be around to have to deal with the long-term fallout for what happens if or when this all fails.